Oh, that's cool.
Yeah.
Excellent. So I just recorded this for the students who can't make it. I'm going to keep that running throughout the presentation. I know we're here for extra credit, so I will not keep you guys long, but I'm going to wait one more minute because there's always a straggler who shows up later on. I usually do this on Wednesdays at 5. We had to move it because I had a work conflict yesterday. I'm actually very lucky to be in New York City, and I had an event I had to be at yesterday. But today the work event ended, and I'm able to join you all. But all that being said, we're going to jump into it. I know you guys need to grab your screenshot in order to get your credit, which I respect. But we're going to walk through this anyways. It's going to be about 10 minutes, and we will let you all get on with your afternoon. So today we're here to talk about creating value. You have been through many of the 7 C's as you continue your journey of understanding how you take an idea from, how you take a concept from an idea to market, right? And building out your deck is an important part of that. And now we're at that stage of creating value. So I'm going to walk you through a couple of real world examples of how we've done that in my career at 2 companies I've worked for. And these are both small, almost startup, a little bigger than startup, multi-million-dollar, but not big companies, still companies where like you could know every employee in the building by name kind of companies. One is called Sonicu, which does temperature monitoring for healthcare and life science and food service. And the other one's called Vestage, which provides vehicle cameras for commercial vehicles. Okay, so we're going to start with Sonicu. And what we're looking at here is one of their competitors' websites. And when I worked there, this really got me thinking about the market as a whole and how we can create value for a larger segment of the market. So Sonicu was invented in order to serve the healthcare environment. Essentially, everything in a hospital, not everything, but a lot of things in a hospital that will be injected or administered into a person are temperature controlled. So think about blood, plasma, organs, vaccines, drugs. They're all very, very sensitive to having what is called a temperature excursion, being outside of the temperature in which they kind of maintain their salience and their value to the patient. As I looked around at the market, though, we saw that there's another giant market that is a little less, shall we say, sexy than healthcare, because healthcare is a very lucrative environment because people are willing to pay so much, obviously, to receive great healthcare. But food, right? Every restaurant, commercial kitchen, and especially schools have kitchens that have refrigerators and freezers that, as we all know from our personal life, are also temperature sensitive. And what's very interesting is that we probably don't recognize it in our personal life because we just have one refrigerator at home, right? And usually that refrigerator works flawlessly until one day it just dies and you get a new one, right? But if you run a school system and you have 25 schools, you probably have 100 refrigerators and freezers. And when you have 100 fridges and freezers, and especially the ones that you walk into to store food, they can die, and you can lose thousands of dollars, if not tens of thousands of dollars worth of food. And more importantly, you can be in a position to not be able to serve your students the next day. And this is especially important in rural, urban, kind of vulnerable environments in which many students, the best and perhaps sadly the only meal they enjoy for the day is the one they consume at school. So we looked around the market and said, goodness, there's this tremendous part of the market we're not serving where we can go and create a huge amount of value. Moreover, the food industry is well aware of the fact that they have a huge waste problem, right? Not just the waste of food that's not eating, but food that is lost to temperature excursions. And all this food is first cultivated in a farm or in some sort of processing environment. And to lose that food is to lose a tremendous amount of value. So we looked around the market and said, we know we're good in healthcare. And in this case, we're going to move down market, not up market like a lot of companies try to do, to a less sophisticated, less stringent environment and sell the same product software-wise to a much larger market, right? And ultimately, what we're able to do is create value for this whole new market with the same exact product. So part of your job as entrepreneurs is to constantly be scanning the horizon, understanding what your competitors are doing and what's going on in the market, and not being blinded by either the success or the challenges you're having in your core market, right? Our core market was healthcare. There's hospitals in almost every county in America, huge healthcare systems in big urban environments. It was enough to keep us properly busy. And yet we found the wherewithal, the focus, and kind of the business intensity to go attack a new market, to create value elsewhere, right? So as you're thinking about your entrepreneurial journey, you should always be looking around you at your competition, whether that's quite simply on their website or by going to trade shows, or even better, listening to your clients, going out and engaging with them and hearing the way they're interacting with your competitors, taking that information back and seeing if you can apply what you're doing elsewhere. There are many, many, many examples of this throughout the business world where someone had an idea that was great for one segment and applied it elsewhere. Okay, moving on to Vestage. So this is a very interesting use case in which we think of cameras that goes in vehicles mainly as a tool to keep an eye on the driver and keep an eye on the road and be there in case law enforcement has an incident, i.e. someone fell asleep at the wheel or was distracted driving or, right? What we found was that there is this very, for lack of a better word, unscrupulous and borderline predatory cabal of attorneys who have taken normal accidents that happen in the course of a normal operation for a logistics provider, right? And turn them into what's called nuclear verdicts. So what does that mean? That means, Evan, you are a 40-year-old trucking professional who inherited a business from his father, who inherited it from his father, and you run 220 trucks out of Phoenix that deliver, produce and other goods to Los Angeles and to San Francisco and so forth. And when you run 220 trucks, you're going to have a handful of accidents every single year with that many trucks on the road, traveling that many miles. Some of them will be just natural accidents where weird things happen in bad weather or through no fault of the driver. Some of them will be driver negligence, right? And what happened was these attorneys, and you've seen these commercials on TV, right? Where they're telling you to go after the big truck company who you've been injured by. They've taken what used to be 10, 20 years ago, a big truck would get in an accident. No one would die. It wouldn't be that, critical. People would get injured, but it used to be an incident where people would get paid out a couple $100,000 for the loss of their work or the loss of pain and suffering in their vehicle and their time, and so on and so forth. And they've turned these into what's called nuclear verdicts, right? And so what's happened is there has been this explosion in which these claims now become $5, $10, $20 million outcomes from fairly run-of-the-mill accidents. Some of them include fatalities, which are always horrible, right? No one wants to see someone die, but sometimes these are truly accidents where they happen in the rain, or someone had a blind spot, or an animal ran in the road, like things that were not the fault of negligent. And what we found was these are destroying family businesses. And there is story after story after story of these businesses that are 50, 60, 70, 80 years old, passed down through the generations, They'd been doing things the right way. They didn't have a history of safety violations. They had all their drivers with the right licenses, the right drug tests. By every measure, they were good, sound, fair businesses that any of us would be proud to work for. And they were being destroyed by these nuclear verdicts, by run-of-the-mill accidents. And sometimes they were accidents that were a driver's fault, but the driver just lost attention for a moment, or even worse, fell asleep at the wheel after a long trip. But they weren't the fault of someone drunk driving or doing something that's truly negligent and malicious, right? And so what we were able to find out is that by tapping into this and understanding the client's problem, that there is this entire industry of attorneys that are destroying these family businesses. You're able to go sell to them in a different way and create value in a different way. Before, the value was around just being able to show law enforcement that the driver was doing the right thing. Now you're capturing video evidence that is used in a trial that could decide the fate of a business that employs 100 people. And it's not just worrying about one driver. Will they keep their license and potentially go to jail for 90 days for, speeding or switching lanes illegally or one of those kind of behaviors. So it's your job when you're innovating to never assume the problem you solved for is static. The problem is always evolving. And the only way to do this is through that real fundamental understanding that we developed in the 7 C's, which is constant client engagement. Constantly understanding through talking to the client, reading the trade publications, going to the trade shows, understanding the problems the client's having and how your solution solves for them. In this case, by moving our positioning as a tool to prevent nuclear verdicts and away from protect yourself from law enforcement or protect yourself when an accident happens, it's more about protecting the entire sanctity of your business. We're able to sell an entirely different way that is more emotional based and fear based, for lack of a better word, than it is more logically based. So the takeaway here is the creation of value evolves, whether it's at Sonicu and the temperature monitoring or at Vestage with the vehicle cameras. And you as entrepreneurs must keep that in mind all the time and constantly be engaging with your industry, with your customer base to evolve with it. And there are many, many examples of people who kept solving the same problem, lost the business because the problem changed and they didn't change with it. So I told you I'd keep it brief. We went for 14 minutes there. I hope you all don't mind. I hope you got your extra credit and are good to go. Evan and Vivian, it was great to meet you. I appreciate you all joining. And I wish, any questions before I let you go for the evening?
So you mentioned like the nuclear lawsuits. Since I don't extremely know how that works, you mentioned how like in the beginning they would get like maybe like $100,000 and suddenly got ramped up to like 20 million. But like the actual case themselves didn't change. So how were they able to really like, I guess, how were the lawyers able to like turn it into like something that's like worth $20 million in the first place?
It's a great question that right now the industry is trying to go solve and push that number backwards. Mm-hmm. They basically, Vivian, it's a great question, but what they basically did was, and I hate to put it like this because it sounds callous, but they inflated the value of a human life, right? So like most of us have life insurance as you become an adult, and you get a life insurance policy worth $1 or $2 million. And that policy says, if I get hit by a car or a tree falls on me or I drown or some weird thing happens when I'm 33 years old, that's enough money for my spouse and my kids to take care of themselves so they're not without a house and food for the rest of their life, right? And so verdicts were largely based on like the bar set by insurance policy. No one outside of maybe like Warren Buffett or LeBron James or those kind of people would ever take out a life insurance policy for $20 million. It would just cost too much money to do that. And no insurer would really underwrite that for a normal person. None of us are really worth $20 million, right? Because what we're really worth is the sum of our total future earnings, right? So if you make $100,000 a year over 20 years, that's $2 million. So you're worth about $2 million in terms of what you need to replace for your family. So what they were able to do somehow is inflate the value of human life based on emotion. Like, what is Vivian's life really worth? What is Evan's life really worth? What is Brian's life really worth? Well, for our families and people that love us, it's priceless, right? So they use that kind of mentality, and juries went for it. And you can see here in the statistics, between 2010 and 2018, the average size of a jury verdict in trucking trials rose from 2.3 million, again, like a normal life insurance policy for someone who's got a good career, to 22.2 million. Almost 1,000% increase. So it's a great question. What I've read is that attorneys were able to tap into people's fear that this could happen to them. And what is your life worth? If you lost your mother, your father, your daughter, someone you loved, isn't it worth $20 million? In reality, it's so hard, right? Because like there's no price you can put on a human life and what we're all worth. But statistically speaking, very few of us are worth $20 million. We just don't have that potential future earning. We just know that statistically and what the average person makes. So they've somehow succeeded in tapping more into like our emotions of human life value than the raw kind of analytics of what people really earn. I hope that's helpful.
Yeah, that answered the question. Thank you.
Yeah, great question. And to me, it's super interesting how they've been able to achieve it. And us as Americans have facilitated it because these are all jury trials. So we sit on juries, right? You might not have been called to jury duty yet, but I've been called to jury duty twice in my life. It's all of us, our friends and neighbors and parents and teachers that have facilitated this. So like so many things in our society, it both disgusts us and forces us to question how have we collectively done this to ourselves. Because the sad reality is when you do this, you rise the rate of insurance and they have to pass that on to us and higher rates for trucking. And because everything moves by truck, that means your produce, your television, your furniture, everything that you look around came to where it is from a truck, right? It moved by ship initially, then a truck. So these verdicts may seem esoteric and like way over there in a different world, but they reach into all of our lives through higher prices. So that is the next chapter in the 7 C's value creation. Evan, Vivian, thank you so much for joining. I wish you guys the best in the rest of the semester and have a great evening.
Thank you.
Thank you.
You too.
Have a good
Take
night.
care. Bye-bye.